Educational technology is a common term which is found in all educational institutions and its usage in teaching learning process. Educational technology, when we talk of the very term, what does it mean? What is its significance? Why should a teacher at all use educational technology? Such questions arise in our mind. As you know, today a teacher depends largely on educational technology of various kinds for his classroom instruction. So, in order to discuss what is educational technology, what is its significance, and the most important part of this concept, how has educational technology evolved over a period of time? Is educational technology which we find today was existent a decade ago or 4 decades ago or a century ago? These are the questions which arise in our minds. In order to find answer to such questions, we have today Dr. Sutapa Bose, who will be talking on educational technology and its evolution. During our discussion, we will be also talking about the importance of educational technology and its various uses in classroom instruction and in distance learning and in many spheres of educational activity. I request Dr. Sutapa Bose to initiate this discussion.
Welcome to our program entitled Educational Technology and its Evolution. Well, before we start the program, first of all, let us have an overview of the things that would be taken up for discussion. We would be discussing the concept of educational technology, that is what it means. Then very briefly we shall go through the technology of education and technology in education, and following that we shall have a discussion on the different phases of technology that reflect the evolution of modern educational technology. Say, we know very well that we had started from the print medium, and from the humble print medium today we have satellite mediated education. So we see that there has been an evolution in this field, and how this has come about that, let us start the discussion. So first of all, educational technology, what does it mean? Well, let us start by analyzing this term into two different terms, that is first of all education and thereafter technology, and then we shall see what educational technology means to us. Well, education, what does this term mean? Now we know that by the term education we can have several types of definitions. We do have different kinds of definitions, but what we basically say is that education is a process by which we intend to shape the behavior of the learner, that is the person to whom education is being imparted. We intend through this process to shape his or her behavior. Now, what is meant by this? For instance, that person may be lacking specialized knowledge, or say for that matter knowledge in a particular field, or the person may be lacking certain skills, or may not be having a particular kind of attitude. So this is the behavior that exists at this moment, and after that education is being imparted to that person. So after this process is over, we expect that person to have a new sort of behavior in which he or she would be having new knowledge and maybe a new set of skills, maybe a change in attitude. So we see that education basically tends to shape the behavior of the learner. And then again, it is also an attempt to bring out the potential or the abilities that are there within a learner. For instance, a person who has the aptitude for legal studies would like to become a lawyer. Or let us take another illustration. For instance, a person wants to become a teacher, and that person is already having the aptitude for teaching. Now, although this person is having the aptitude for teaching or the aptitude for legal studies, but without having that sort of formal education, or for that matter education in any form, that person would not be able to give shape or to fulfill the potential that is within him. So for that, that person attends some professional courses or some other programs, educational programs, and after that he becomes a full-fledged lawyer or a full-fledged teacher. So we see that to bring out the best within an individual, to fulfill the potential that exists within the individual, the process of education is necessary. So now friends, we know what is education. Now let us talk about technology. As I have mentioned before, we are taking an analytical approach to this term educational technology. So what is technology? This is a term that we frequently use in our daily life. But what does it actually mean? Well, we see that technology basically is the human innovation of the knowledge that is already availing in a particular field. For instance, the knowledge about energy. This is just an illustration. So we know what energy is, what are the different forms of energy. We also know about the transformation or about the change from one form of energy to another. So this knowledge exists, and now how this could be put to use, how there could be innovations from it, and as a result we have various types of technologies. For instance, we have the fan, we have electric light and many other things. So we see that the knowledge that is already existing is being innovatively used, is being put to use. So, and as a result of it, we develop certain systems that help us in solving problems. Now, what could be the problems? For instance, a person is having a problem of breathlessness. So, he is put on artificial respiration. So, this technology solves the problem of breathlessness. Or for instance, there is no light in a particular area. So, this is a problem. And when we apply technology, when we have the system of lighting in that particular area, the problem is solved. So, we see that technology can solve problems and extend human capabilities. Now, what does extending human capabilities mean? For instance, to lift a heavy load, cranes are used. Or let us take another illustration. For example, nowadays with the rapid expansion of the knowledge base, it is not possible for a textbook or for the teacher to contain all the information that exists on a particular topic or in a particular area. So we resort to technology. That is, for instance, we may go to the World Wide Web or even the print technology, say encyclopedia. So this is how technology solves our problems, extend the human capabilities. It brings about innovation or changes to modify the natural environment. Now, what does this mean? For instance, let us take the example of a classroom where a teacher is teaching a group of students. You would see that they switch on the lights or they switch on the fans. Why? To have proper illumination, to have proper ventilation. Then they may use a computer or a television set for learning. So we see that the natural environment that was existing has been modified through technology. So these are various applications of technology. Now we see that in the website that is given here, we see that it has been defined as innovation, change or modification of the natural environment to satisfy perceived human needs and wants. So the needs and wants here were for light, were for ventilation, and how technology helps in fulfilling these needs. And then again, it is the scientific knowledge that is used in a practical manner to facilitate a process. It could comprise of certain techniques, methods that are designed to facilitate a process. The process, it goes without saying, is the teaching learning process. So educational technology basically helps in facilitating the teaching learning process so that we can fulfill the objectives and reach the goals of our education in a better way. And then again, according to the online encyclopedia Wikipedia, we have the very beautiful definition of instructional technology, which says that instructional technology involves theory and practice of design, development, utilization, management and evaluation of processes and resources for learning. Now let us deliberate a bit upon this definition. First of all, let us take up designing, development, utilization. So you see that as teachers also, we often select certain softwares that could be helpful for teaching. So the teachers may also be engaged in designing and developing these softwares and then utilizing them. Then the process of management, which would include procurement of these softwares, when to utilize them, how best to utilize them, these all things are there. And the evaluation of the processes. It is not only that assessment is carried out through technology, but also the technology per se has to be evaluated. Its pedagogical strength, weakness, all these things are involved. So we see that this is how we can define technology and educational technology.
Let us summarize what you have discussed about educational technology. Basically, in a very common understanding, if you define educational technology, it is the application of scientific knowledge which is generated in science, technology, as well as different kinds of behavioral sciences, and its application in teaching learning process, and to facilitate this teaching learning process to attain predetermined objectives. As you know that whenever a teaching learning process is designed, it has certain predetermined objectives. In order to achieve those objectives, a teacher takes the help of both methods and media, which in this context we may say that educational technology. This educational technology as well as the different kinds of methods a teacher uses to achieve the predetermined objectives. So educational technology is basically a facilitative mechanism which helps to achieve the predetermined objectives in instructional process. And it has, as you have said, that it has the component of instructional technology, which is related to design planning, design and developing, utilizing, managing, evaluating different activities associated with teaching learning. So now let us discuss about what are different applications, broadly drawing from this concept, what are the different applications of educational technology in teaching learning process.
Well, the question is, why apply educational technology? What is the need to go for it? Now, as we have been discussing and as Dr. Das has also very rightly pointed out, the main purpose of applying educational technology to the field of teaching and learning is that to fulfill the objectives of learning and to reach the goals of education in a better way by applying scientific knowledge. And we also desire to design and control the environment, media and methods, and as we have been just discussing how technology helps us in controlling the environment in a way that suits us the most, and then to facilitate the process of teaching and learning. Now in this regard, for instance, now you are studying through the distance mode and you see how technology is helping you in obtaining instructions, or it is helping the teachers in imparting instructions. So you see that especially in the field of distance education, and not only that, even in the traditional classroom also, technology today has a major role to play. So when we go for mass education, for instance, we have to teach thousands or lakhs together, then nothing but the technology can help us in this regard. And then again, for educational resources, it helps us in storing information. You see that the files containing yellow papers, which would go yellow with age, which would become brittle, moth-eaten. So gone are the days of such type of storage. Now we can store information in a much better manner in digitalized form, and we do have the mechanisms for that. And so you see storage, and at the same time you need not go into a dusty room and look for a paper and yourself go through dusty piles of papers, but instead of that, with a click of a button you can retrieve that much information for which you are looking. So you see it helps in storage, retrieval and also in instant communication. Today we have such facilities with which we can communicate almost anything, content in any form, with anyone at any time. So this is the flexibility that is imparted through educational technology. and of course independent learning. Now sitting at your home or in your office or even in any place that suits you, you can have an access to the instructions that are being provided by your institution. So you see that it helps in independent learning, and then again it helps in the development of higher cognitive abilities. How? For instance, let us take an illustration here. A student is learning through the World Wide Web. For instance, he is searching for some information on a particular topic. So he will browse through it and selectively collect the information that he desires or that is needed for him. So here he exercises the process of selection, and after that, when the information has been thus been collected, it is again processed. It may be analyzed, it may be synthesized, and after that the inference may be drawn. So we see that instead of just mugging up the things that are given through a print medium in a textbook or the lecture of a teacher, here the student on his or her own is applying certain higher cognitive skills. And not only that, there is also, today education is no longer for one particular fixed goal, that is just for getting a job. No, in the dynamic economic condition today, the needs keep on changing, and hence we have to be lifelong learners. And it is not possible to attend schools and colleges or educational institutions throughout the life. But technology definitely helps us in being lifelong learners, and so thus we can access the educational resources.
That's good that as you know that educational technology has a number of uses, and perhaps if one thinks today without educational technology it's possible to provide effective teaching, I would say that perhaps this notion is completely wrong. As you know that with the emerging technologies, different kinds, so if they are used in teaching learning process, perhaps teaching learning will be the most effective activity. So if we consider its use, it has right from the classroom instruction where the teacher carries out the instructional activities. It has wide application like distance education, lifelong education, research in education, storing information, air travel, even carrying out certain hazardous experiments which are very dangerous. They can be demonstrated through educational technology. It facilitates independent learning, as you have rightly said. A learner is with the computer aided instruction, computer assisted instruction. A learner is nowadays independent. He is not required to get the help of any direct teacher. So that's the wide range of activities where educational technology can be of use. Now let us understand when we are talking of the concept educational technology, sometimes there is a distinction, differentiation between technology of education, technology in education. So what is exactly meant by this? Briefly you can discuss about that, and then we can perhaps switch over to the most important aspect of the present session, that is evolution of educational technology. Briefly you tell about technology of education and technology in education.
Well, there are two terms in use, technology of education and technology in education. Now, first of all, let us discuss what is meant by technology of education. This basically deals with the systematic application of knowledge regarding the various aspects of education. And if we try to make it more specific, then we could say that it could include certain things like framing learning objectives, how to frame them, what are the considerations during this process, then the learning process, how it takes place, whether it is through a massed method or it is through a spaced method. So there are different aspects of learning process, and then the nature of learners, that is what are the interests of the learners, what are their needs, their age, their level of maturity, readiness, and many other things are taken into consideration. And then also the selection of teaching method, whether it's going to be a teacher-centered method or it's going to be a learner-centered method, or we are going to adopt an eclectic path. So there are several things for which their deliberations are needed, and of course the choice of media, the utilization of media and other technological aids are also there. And so we see that this is basically a concept that is related to the behavioral science, which is an outcome of the developments that are taking place within the field of education. For instance, model of teaching, inquiry model, or say the types of learning. So the behavioral science aspect comes into play here, and basing on that we have technology of education. And I would like to reiterate here that these are the developments that emerge out of the field of education. Now, as against it, we have the technology in education. Now, what we had said was that technology of education basically deals with the developments within the field of education. But as against that, when we talk about technology in education, we talk about the developments that have been developed in the field of science and technology, but are being put to use in the field of education to facilitate the process of teaching and learning. So we see here that these are the outcomes of scientific developments applied to the field of education. For instance, we have used the radio, we still use it, then we use the television, and we also use computers, and not only that, even satellites are used today. And other than that, for instance, the voice over internet protocol, interactive television, podcasting, there are a number of things which were initially developed in the field of science and technology. Gradually their use started in the corporate world, and after that they are being successfully used in the field of education. So here we have two components, hardware and software. Hardware, or the machine to through which the softwares are used or displayed, and the software, that is the educational programs that are being developed usually by teachers or other educationists.
That's good. That's the difference between technology of education, technology of education relates to the knowledge which is generated out of different kinds of behavioral sciences like psychology, sociology, management sciences, and cybernetics, and the knowledge generated out of these sciences, their application to facilitate instructional process. That is basically technology of education. When we come to technology in education, it is the machine concept of educational technology, or hardware concept of educational technology, where different gadgets they are put to use, and they are the hardware part of educational technology, and software, the programs and different kinds of principles which are applied to develop educational programs. So this when these two they combine together, they generate into educational technology. Now this very concept educational technology, it has evolved through 4 different phases. So let us look at these phases and discuss briefly about these phases.
What are the different phases of educational technology evolution? How educational technology has evolved through the ages? Now, first of all, we had the audio-visual phase. After that, the psychology, sociology based phase, then the cybernetic phase, and finally we are here at the computer and telecommunication phase. Now let us go through all these phases individually. First of all, let us take up the audio-visual phase. Now, as you know that print technology was the first technology that was used in the field of education, and after that, after a long gap, I should say that when the radio was invented, and in the last century, towards the beginning of it, radio started to be used. And after that we did, before radio also we had blackboards, then film strips, maps, charts, slides, television also we are having. So you see that these are all such devices that provide information to students, or that help in providing instructions to students or learners. For instance, the print technology, we may take up the case of a book or any such printed document. When the learner reads it, the learner knows certain things. And then the blackboard. Now regarding the blackboard, a gentleman had written that in the year 1813, in the academic year 1813 and 14, when he happened to visit a mathematics school in Boston in USA, he saw for the first time in his life, and he confessed in 1845 that he had never come across such a thing before, was a huge blackboard in the classroom. And in a ledger just below it, there were chalks, and also a piece of cloth with which to clean the blackboard. Now this was a technological marvel at that period of time. But today we are very much against the chalk and talk method. Why? Because you see, whether it is the print medium, that is the book, or the blackboard, or film strips, or maps, or charts, or slides, or even a radio talk or a television program, if they are not interactive, they definitely provide us with information. They may also try to provide the learners with instructions. But what is the problem with it? The problem with it is that they are not allowing interactivity. There is just one-way communication. So whether it is from the teacher or from a technological aid, the flow of instruction, the flow of information is just one-sided. And as we know very well that until and unless there is scope, provision for interactivity, learning cannot be facilitated. So we see that there is one-way transmission from the teacher to taught, and these are non-interactive modes with one-way communication. So as we see here, the communication flow is from the source to the learners without the scope for the learners to provide any or to ask any question or to express their doubt. So there is no provision of feedback in this system. So this is the audio-visual phase. Coming to the next phase, which is based on the psychosocial approach. Now you may have heard about B.F. Skinner, and he is famous for his operant conditioning, his theory of learning, which is based upon operant conditioning. And as you also know that this was a behavioristic approach to learning. That is, he emphasized that the behavior of the learner can be shaped, can be modified in a desirable manner. And this approach was basically based upon the provision of reinforcement. So reinforcement for the correct response, or for instance, when a particular behavior, that which is desirable, is expressed by the learner, it is at once reinforced, say through some reward. The reward may be a material reward or an acknowledgement, so that it becomes a permanent fixture. And this is how behavior is shaped gradually. So after that, another step may be taken up, and for instance, the child learns to write C. You say very good. And after that you find him writing A. You say well done. And then again after that, when he writes T and says CAT, you feel that the child has stepwise learned how to spell the word cat. And this is how Skinner said that behavior can be shaped. And for this, it is very important to provide timely feedback. So we see here that the provision of feedback is there. And so there is a gradual progression, and from simple things, complex things are learned. And in this regard, we would also mention about the teaching machine that was invented by Sidney L. Pressey in the early 20s of the last century. And this was also based upon programmed learning, or the operant conditioning was taken into consideration. That is, the right response was given a feedback, as well as the wrong response was also given a feedback, and the right responses were selected, and thereafter the next learning material was placed. So this is basically the theme on which the teaching machine is based. So we see that there is an external control to shape the behavior. How learning takes place will depend upon the external control that is being exercised. But this theory or this concept has got its own share of criticism. Today it is believed that it is not that we always learn through external control, that we always need someone outside to control and shape our behavior. Learning can also be through one's own efforts. And this is, as we know, we shall talk about it not in details but briefly, constructivism, whereby knowledge is constructed through one's own efforts, whereby one structures and organizes the learning experiences, controls learning environment, and can modify it as well as his own behavior, and thereby perform self-learning. So we see that as against the mechanistic approach of the behaviorists, this is not so. And here one's own efforts rather than an external control are taken into consideration.
You have talked about two major phases, initial phases, that is audiovisual phase and psychosocial phase. Particularly if we trace to the history of evolution of education technology, the first comes audiovisual phase, And long back, a teacher had to depend upon blackboard or chalkboard, then some books. Of course, when radio came into existence and radio was used as a means of communicating ideas, and then technology helped educational process to be mass based. Then of course usual technologies, this maps, charts, slides, posters, pictures, they were used by a teacher. And at that time one must mark here that it was not called educational technology but audio visual aids. So if one really look into the past history of education technology, that time one finds that they are called audio visual aids. But in the 1950s and onwards, when the behavioral sciences, particularly experiment in psychology and management science and different theories which emerged in sociology, psychology and different behavioral sciences, they contributed a lot to the understanding of the classroom processes, and in turn they were applied to help the classroom teaching learning process along with the machine input. Therefore, this phase was called the phase psychosocial phase, and here the most significant contribution was made by B.F. Skinner, as you have rightly said, and based on Skinner's idea that operant conditioning, teaching machine was invented, and Freshie, who invented this teaching machine, took feedback as the basis of developing material, and where the self-learning concept emerged. Of course, late 80s, this constructivist idea came into existence, and it also influenced this application in teaching learning process, and till now the idea is in its experimental stage, and it will take some time to be part of educational process. And along with this development, one of the most prominent development which also is parallel with Skinner's contribution on operant conditioning, that was cybernetics. And cybernetics has really influenced educational technology in understanding the teaching learning process, also to develop the modern self-learning material and self-learning concept.
Next phase in the evolution of educational technology, that is cybernetic phase. Now this term cybernetics, it has originated from the word kybernetes, which meant pilot or a steersman, that is a person who basically had the role of navigating, whether it is a ship or a airship. So you see that cybernetics is a study of communication. It is basically a study of communication and control, but it is based on the feedback that which is obtained, the feedback that which is available to the person who is steering the system or who is navigating the system. So you see that it involves regulatory feedback. Now what does this mean, regulatory feedback? The feedback is used as an information which would be used for future regulation of the device, whether it's a ship or any other system. Now this can be a human system or it can be any other machine, and it therefore the emphasis is basically upon the feedback that is received for exercising subsequent control and maneuvering of a system. Now in this regard, let us take up an illustration. For instance, a person is driving a car and he checks the instrument that indicates the speed, and he finds that he is driving at a speed of say 80 kilometers per hour, and now he is going to drive along a very steep path which goes high, say a bridge. So he knows that he has to lower down the speed. So basing on the information that is available to the driver, that is 80 kilometers per hour, he then decides to utilize this information and bring down the speed. For instance, he now wants to drive at 30 kilometers per hour. So you see that his movement or his maneuvering has been changed on the basis of what? On the basis of the feedback that was available. Now after he has crossed the bridge, now he knows that it is again safe to drive at a higher speed. So he again drives at a higher speed. So again his source of information was the speedometer, which indicated the speed at which he was driving. Or let us take up another illustration in this regard. For instance, the thermostat of an air conditioner. You may set it at 22 degrees centigrade if you feel cold, and after that the machine, if it is an automatic one, would regulate itself through the information that you have provided or the user has provided. And when the temperature is at 22 degree, it may shut down for a while, and again when the temperature of the room rises, it again starts functioning. So you see that the information that is continually being put into the device or a human system or a machine for that matter, that is being taken into consideration to regulate the path of action. So we see that it causes us to move along a predetermined path through the transfer of information and feedback. And we also compare the effect of the action on the path. See, for instance, now I am driving at 40 kilometers per hour, it is okay. Or if I am driving at 80 kilometers per hour, it is not desirable. So what effect the information or the input has on our course of action, that is very important in this system. And the path is definitely predetermined, and the feedback redirects the subsequent actions. So from this evolved the systems approach to learning, where there are different components. For example, we can take even the human system. There is a circulatory system, there is a nervous system, there are many different systems, but ultimately all these systems are working in a coordinated manner, maintaining a sort of harmony amongst each other. So, and the feedback from one system flows into another. So this is what is about cybernetic phase. And about this, maybe Dr. Das would like to tell you something.
And you have very well defined the concept cybernetics. Particularly, as you have said, there are two major concepts: feedback in humans and feedback in machines. This cybernetics, the idea has come from basically biological engineering and mechanical engineering. When we talk about biological engineering, the biological mechanism which operates in our body system, as you have given very nicely the example of different organs in the body systems, they operate and they have a self-regulated feedback mechanism. So if there is this stomach feels that it needs food, then it gives some indication. It gives some indication feedback to the biological organism. So we are in need of food. Similarly, as you have given the example of air conditioned machines, so their automatically system operates, and the same concept was taken in educational situation where we developed our to start with the self-learning material is based on this feedback mechanism. A student goes through the material, and then the questions are put, and he gets immediate this automatical feedback which is built into the material. So this has also has brought in revolution in the field of educational technology. It has a lot of application in terms of program learning, also self-learning, even computer assisted instruction, and many form of computer related instruction, computer assisted learning, then even simulation and many other things which are there in educational technology. They are the product of this cybernetic concept. Now, having discussed that, then we can perhaps over to the fourth phase, that is computer and telecommunication phase. That is the latest phase, and this is the phase where we are at present live in, and what are the different contribution of this phase to educational technology?
The cybernetic phase has been summed up, that is from input to process to output, and compare with expected results, find the deviations, and the feedback helps us in taking the remedial measures. The fourth phase, that is the computer and telecommunication phase. Now we know that we are at present living in this particular age of telecommunications. Tele means, as you know, distance, and communication also you know very well, that is the exchange of information, you could say. So you see that in this particular phase, telecommunication, there is the scope for interactivity. Whether it is television or even radio and television are also becoming interactive. You know very well that even our university provides you with interactive programs, whether through radio or television, and then we also have the facility of telephone. And besides that, for instance, nowadays multimedia is a method of providing instructions where we no longer bank upon one particular medium but upon many media which are used simultaneously to provide information and instructions. And in this regard, we also have certain parts of the multimedia package which could be interactive. That gives the learner enough scope to maneuver the learning or to get feedback. For instance, there may be options of quizzes, there may be options of drawings, etc., where the learner feels that he is also an active pursuer of knowledge. So we see that in this interactive phase, in this telecommunication phase, the main advantage is that there is full-fledged interactivity, and there is also, we today have computer networking with facilities, as you very well know, email, chat, conferencing, and then telephone facilities are also there. And telephone is no longer through the switched network system but also through the internet telephony, and we also have the internet. Satellites are today used for networking, and from one particular device we can have the facilities of several other technologies. So we see that from print technology how we have evolved and come to the latest one, we should say, that is satellite mediated teaching learning.
You have nicely presented the computer and telecommunication phase, and perhaps all of us know that this is the phase which is now existing, and with interactive multimedia, interactive television, then computer networking, teleconferencing, and mobile technology, and all the latest technologies which are emerging every now and then one can find nowadays. So they are of great help to educational activities, the teaching learning process, instructional process. So now we come to the end of the program. In this program we discussed about the concept of educational technology, its various uses, and how educational technology has evolved over the last century from audiovisual phase, and it has moved through socio-psychological phase, cybernetic phase, and ultimately it has now reached computer and telecommunication phase. And for the discussion and for your presentation, let me thank you, and we hope that you have enjoyed the program.